Here it is the third time you visit our country, and we would like just to know your impression after you had met, and you will also meet other institutions, refugees, public authorities. What are your impressions now?
I came here the first time in March 2022, just after the beginning of the war in Ukraine, after the Russian invasion triggered the war and triggered this massive outflow of refugees. During my first visit here, I went to Palanca where people were still coming in very large numbers. This was an emergency. I think that thanks to three things: the leadership of the government, the support of the international community, but most importantly, the extraordinary hospitality of the Moldovan people, the situation of refugees has to an extent stabilized. We are now talking not anymore of emergency assistance, but how to ensure that refugees go to school, that they can have access to health services, to work, and at the same time that this doesn't penalize the Moldovan people. However, what has not changed is that we still have a terrible war just next door, with the risk always that it deteriorates again, and this is of extreme concern still now, but in a very different way from 2 years ago.
How do you think, looking from above and looking back, did Moldova manage to face this problem and to solve the issues?
Everybody knows, but let's repeat it. It was not just the people who stayed here. Now there are 120,000. But all those that went through to Romania and other places. But Moldova was the transit. So it was an enormous burden. And we struggled, all of us, with the government in the beginning. In the end, I think that we managed to address the situation. Was it perfect? Certainly not. But it could have been much worse if there had been no leadership, no support, and like I said, if the people had become hostile. Here is a country that is not rich, is small, is outside the European Union, and yet we don't see a backlash against the refugee. People keep understanding that these people are suffering in their country, are the victims of an invasion and of a war that they did not start, and therefore they need solidarity. You know, I always say Moldova is an example in Europe and to the international community.
So far, would you mention a few good practices that we may multiply at the international level or to give others to know?
For example, I'll give you a small example, but very telling. Last night, as soon as I arrived, I went with Minister Buzu, the Minister of Social Affairs, of Labor and Social Affairs, to visit a home for people that are elderly or have some severe disabilities. This is an existing home. It existed before the influx of Ukrainian refugees. When the influx happened, this home became open also to refugees that had the same characteristics, maybe elderly people with some health issues and so forth. First of all, great generosity, because this is not a rich structure. The government is running it. People there are enormously dedicated, but I can see that they don't have many resources, and yet they opened the door. But then I want to say there is an advantage for them now, because we were able to invest some resources in improving the infrastructure, in helping with the care, not only for the refugees, also for the Moldovan people, and everybody benefits. And if one day, hopefully, refugees go back to their country, this will remain as an investment for Moldova. So this is a simple example, and there are many others, a good example of good practice that can be a win-win for everybody in this terrible situation.
That looks great. I just would like if you can mention what kind of help UNHCR provides to Moldovan society, to refugees, but also to the country here.
At that time, you will remember everything was needed: blankets, food, medicines. So it was really a humanitarian operation. And progressively, we are now evolving this, and our help is more with how can we ensure that Ukrainian children go to school? How can we ensure that Ukrainians can find jobs without damaging the Moldovan people? Especially, many refugees are women. For them, employment is more complicated in many ways. So we're looking at this longer term now. Of course, we are all keen to see peace come back to Ukraine, a just peace come back to Ukraine, so that people can go back. But we don't know how long this will last. I am worried about the situation there. The president today shares with us her own concerns. It may last for some more time, so we need to be organized for that. I'm very worried that fatigue will come in, that some politicians will say, no more, we have done enough. We have not done enough. It is the responsibility of the entire international community to continue to support the people of Ukraine.
So now we go more from emergency support to integration support. And this is, I think, very important, because if we don't know how long this war will last, we should do something so people who had to move to feel integrated in the society. And UNHCR is here to provide help.
So I think inclusion is really the key word here. Inclusion in education, in health services, and employment. These are the three main areas that we're looking at together with the government. There is a very good cooperation there, but it requires resources. And these are not resources that UNHCR mobilizes directly. We're not a development organization, but I just come now here to your office from a meeting with the key donor governments, embassies, but also the World Bank. The World Bank has a special fund for countries hosting large numbers of refugees. Moldova is eligible for this fund since last year, and they have already mobilized $40 million.
At a human level, I would like to ask you if you had seen a story that touched you, because visiting for 3 times and meeting refugees and meeting people who work with refugees and give them their empathy and time and energy. Is there an example that you may?
I give you 2 examples. One is from my first visit and one is from last night. In my first visit, and I have told this story many times, I was heartbroken by what I saw in Palanca. You remember, and many Moldovans will remember that because you were here, that was the place very often where families separated. So I've witnessed myself, because we walked to the Ukrainian side of the border, and we witnessed families having to separate because men had to stay behind and fight, and women and children and elderly people were coming into Moldova and other countries. And I witnessed, I was trying not to interfere with that human moment, but I will never forget that so many couples, for example, hugging in silence, not knowing what would happen next. Remember, that was a time of enormous uncertainty. We wouldn't know how far this war would go. And last night I had somehow the same experience, but 2 years later from another perspective. In this home that I visited, which I told you about, I met a couple, and a couple of Ukrainian refugees, husband and wife, people of a certain age. And so I told them, do you have children? And they said, our son is fighting in Bakhmut, some of the most tough places of fighting. So I said, are you in touch with him? And they said, he does not want to be in touch with us because he does not want us to worry. These things bring back the human dimension, the tragedy for a family, not to know where your son is and whether he's alive or dead. It is devastating, and it struck me, and again, I won't forget this experience.
So that's why it is important to explain to everybody who maybe has a fatigue of information only. But the fatigue of information and fatigue of fighting, these are very different things.
and the fatigue of being affected by fighting, even if you're not fighting yourselves. The refugees are not fighting themselves, but they are victims of the fighting, of the invasion, of the bombing of civilian infrastructure, of the killing of civilians. They are victims of that. And this is why what Moldova is doing is so important for the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And may I say, for Europe as a whole. So I think it's important to continue to support it. We cannot tolerate fatigue. We cannot afford fatigue. This is going to create a lot of damage. So I hope that politicians, like here in Moldova, but in other countries as well, will continue to support this effort. I don't deal with the military aspect of the war. I am a humanitarian head of agency. But I know that the humanitarian assistance is also part of keeping people strong in this very hardship situation.
Let's speak about the larger aspect of this war and the possible prevention, because now it is like we work reactively to what the war had done to us, and we have refugees and we have tragedies. But could we as a society, could we as UN structure where all the countries are members, to do something to prevent wars? Should we fight more with corruption at one stage? Should we inform people better? What can be done?
When I met President Zelensky last year, he praised the humanitarian effort, encouraged us to continue, especially working with refugees. But he said, in everything that you do, don't think only about helping people in the short term. Think about the future. And I want the future for my country to be a future of peace. So all the help that you give has to think about that. So you give people a blanket or a tent because their house has been destroyed, but give them at the same time the elements to reconstruct their house. I like this approach, not only for Ukraine, for any war, that you think already about building the peace. Very often the international community is pretty good on the humanitarian side, but very bad on the peace building. Now we all hope that Ukraine will find peace again in a manner that respects its sovereignty, its rights, and the rights of its people, clearly. But we hope that it will find peace. But at that time, building the peace will be crucial. And building the peace is many things. Will be reconstruction, but will be also good governance, good institutions, democratic institutions, and so forth. And in a way, you know, I think about Moldova as well. Moldova is also in a nation-building phase. I don't know, I hope I don't sound offensive when I say that. It's a positive effort. The fact that you're now a candidate for accession to the European Union is an additional channel for you to do that. So let's also use this crisis to expand, to go beyond. A final point, because your question is the most important of all. Peace building, can only be achieved positively if there is unity. And this is what worries me the most. The war in Ukraine has further divided the international community. And now we have another big crisis in Gaza, in the Middle East. And all these crises are so divisive. But if the international community does not find unity again in addressing this, in bringing the parties to peace in a right manner, then we will not achieve peace. Then we will continue our investments, but our chances for success will be limited. Thank you, people of Moldova, all of you, for being such a generous host to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. Thank you for understanding, and you perhaps understand it better than many others, what the Ukrainian people are going through, and for allowing this solidarity to last. It may last for more time, we don't know. So I'm asking you to continue to be open, to be generous, and I can assure you that the international community will continue to support you in this effort. I'm here because of that, and I will continue with my organization, with the rest of the United Nations, to fight for this support to Moldova to continue so that you can continue to support the people of Ukraine.
Thank you very much.